You built buildings like SLS Brickell, Brickell Heights, SLS Lux, 1100, 500 Brickell, Icon Bay, Paraíso, Gran Paraíso, Paraíso Bay Views, Hyde Midtown, and we'll talk a lot about Midtown in this podcast.
We are trying to bring a little bit of the design district into Midtown. So that natural street from 36 to 29, Midtown Boulevard, it was thought from day one as a natural connection between the design district and Wynwood. And we are completing the big hole in the donut, which is this 5-acre site.
Yeah.
As a developer, and this is something that Jorge Perez always taught me.
Carlos Rosso, so glad
Omar.
to have you. It's been a pleasure and been a long time that I've been wanting to have you in the seat here.
Thank you very much.
So just so people get an idea, obviously a lot of people in our industry know who you are, but just so more people listening, the audience, you built buildings like SLS Brickell, Brickell Heights, SLS Lux, 1100, 500 Brickell, Icon Bay, Paraíso, Gran Paraíso, Paraíso Bay Views, Hyde Midtown, and we'll talk a lot about Midtown in this podcast, Armani Tower and Sunny Isles, Apogee Beach, and then I told you, okay, stop. We've got enough.
I'm tired already,
Yeah,
just remembering.
Just cut the podcast there. We're good. So I know it's incredible to have you. I really want to talk first just about this deal in Midtown, that you're getting done. So how did it come together? How did the idea come? And where are you now in the process?
Well, we started first, with our first deal in Midtown, which was a standard residence that we are finishing now.
Yep.
It's 228 units on a 14,000 square foot lot. That has some very particular site conditions. We were against a public garage. We did that, or we are doing that with the standard residence, with the standard brand.
Who are your partners in that deal?
Alex Vadia and Midtown Opportunities.
Okay.
And then, following the success of that, we embarked on redeveloping the old Walmart site, which is 5 acres in the middle of Midtown, which is a fantastic site.
Yeah. So if you've ever been in Midtown, which I'm sure you have, if you look at that like dog park and all that stuff that people go, just south of that, there's this huge site. It's 5 acres, like you mentioned, that, they're gonna, I'm assuming slowly but surely redevelop. And right now you're starting with one smaller phase.
Yeah. Basically, we have master planned the site in 2 phases, a north phase and a south phase. There are 4 residential towers and more or less 120,000 square feet of retail in the ground floor.
Wow.
Plus 2 small boutique office towers that are around 60,000 square feet of office. A big gym, of approximately 30,000 square feet.
Okay.
And a paddle racket club with 8 paddle courts on the 3rd floor of the project. So we mixed all the uses together, not only horizontally, but also vertically, and we were trying to find ways to activate particularly the 120,000 square feet of ground floor retail. So we created 2 parks. We created 2 pedestrian paseos that are basically designed based on the dimensions of the paseos that exist in the design district. We are trying to bring a little bit of the design district into Midtown. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very, very interesting project. And for me, it's great to have something of that scale. We are really designing a piece of Miami, a piece of a city.
Huge.
So it's a beautiful challenge. We were just yesterday discussing with Greenberg, the Condo docs and how to organize the ownerships of the different parcels vertically and horizontally. And it's really, that's the part that really excites me a lot.
Because you've obviously built a ridiculous amount of buildings, but for the most part, they've been, here's a condo here, here's a condo there. This is like a Brickell City Center type of development.
What we say that this is a middle brother between Coco Walk being the small brother, big retail component, a little bit of office, but no residential on top.
Right.
And the big brother being Brickell City Center, 4 city blocks, Gigantosaurus, retail. And we are something in the middle.
Yeah.
Where we're really trying to pick the best things of Miami.
Yeah.
From the design, as I was telling you, we walk a lot. I walk a lot in Miami. So, from the dimensions and the designs of the design district, which I think it's a very successful commercial development, to the shade of the trees, the size of the parks, the type of landscaping that we are using, the fenestration, the window openings. We are really, we have like a big board, with all the good examples of things that we all like.
Yeah.
And we have also another big board with all the restaurants that we like and the gyms that we like. So we ask everybody, it's like, hey, put in that pin, what you really like of Miami.
Of everything.
And, there are some very good operators in Miami, and we're trying to bring them all together.
Yeah. What's funny is that you said the Little Brothers Coco Walk, which is a huge development. Obviously, Brickell City Center is massive and yours is in the middle, but it's still a $2 billion project or something?
$2 billion project over the duration of the time. I think,
it's a little, it's a little $2 billion.
No, yeah, but again, if in real estate you have the patience and you have the vision, this is about, selling an idea to the general public. I tell people all the time, when you bought in one of those buildings that you said, a standalone condominium, and particularly now in Miami, when you buy in a standalone condominium, you get maybe the brand of a car, the brand of a clothes, a beautiful rendering of the lobby, the typical couple in a little balcony, and then you don't get anything else.
Correct.
So I tell, when we do the presentation, the last thing we talk is about the unit.
Okay.
We talk more about the public space, the retail on the ground floor, the paddle club, the gym, as things that you're buying as part of your purchase price. So I tell them all the time, it's like, what are you getting for X amount of money? In this project, you're getting that, you're getting that brand, a unit, a lobby and stuff like that. Here, you're part of a master plan development that is 3 blocks away from the design district and 3 blocks away from Wynwood.
Yeah. And across the street from Trader Joe's. It's a big
across the street from Trader Joe's, and Whole Foods is
right there.
It's right there on 29th and Biscayne. So even for the tenants, Midtown has, on retail has a vacancy of 0. There's no empty retail space. Everything. And we'll go into the details why, because I think it's a very interesting way of doing good urban design.
I mean, it's a 54-acre master plan community is how it was designed, no?
Yeah, it was designed like that. And if you think about Midtown, it's surrounded by fast streets. So 29th Street, 36th Street, the railroad tracks on the east, and North Miami Avenue on the other side.
In the west.
Those are streets that basically limit Midtown. Once you drive inside Midtown, Midtown was master planned by Bernard Siskovich 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the way that he designed all the streets basically don't go anywhere. So once you are in Midtown, it's because either you live in Midtown or you want to go to a restaurant in Midtown or you want to shop. The design of the streets, the width of the sidewalks, the fact that you have parallel parking on both sides of the street make you slow down. The traffic it slows down.
And people watching.
People are looking at each other. The sidewalks are 15 feet wide on Midtown Boulevard. The code that when they got Midtown approved, the code says that 90% of the ground floor of Midtown Boulevard has to be glass. So it has to be all retail. And on Midtown Boulevard, you cannot have a garage entrance, you cannot have trash disposal, and you cannot have loading of buildings. All the other streets that go east to west are where the entrances are, or through the backside of where the railroad tracks are. So that natural street from 36 to 29, Midtown Boulevard, it was thought from day one as a natural connection between the design district and Wynwood. Yeah. And we are completing the big hole in the donut, which is this 5-acre site. Yeah. And when we did it, we wanted to incorporate things that already exist in Midtown. Again, I think people, as developers, we always have to look at what exists and what works. In Midtown, there's like a little park in the backside of Midtown that has one of the few kids playgrounds that exist in Miami. You know, if you go there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's full of kids.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, and then there is another place where people do yoga, and it's a small neighborhood park.
Yeah.
And you don't need more, you know, to make this neighborhoods really cozy and really like, you know, at a scale that is appropriate for that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Remember also Midtown has only 150 units an acre of density. Brickell is 500 units at density. Downtown is 1,000. So people are moving away from Brickell and from downtown into Midtown because they prefer less traffic, more retail. More retail on the ground floor generates a ground floor that is 100% active. So people are sitting with little tables, having a coffee, having dinner, you know, and having the ground floor active means that the place is more safe.
Because everyone's just watching.
Everybody's watching.
Yeah.
And also what happens in Midtown is all residential. It's a whole residential neighborhood. So there are no black spots. If you come here, Sabadell, at night, you will see in the ground floor, you know, the homeless come and
7-Eleven is right there.
So and why they do that? Not because they want to bother you, but because they're trying to find places
a little dark,
where they don't bother people. You know? So in Midtown, you know, it's a beautiful neighborhood. And I think the fact that, for example, we did Hyde Midtown, then we did the Standard. Now David is doing, you know, John George bringing,
with
you know,
Michael,
ABC.
Yeah, with Michael Simpkins. He was the last guy on our podcast.
You know, so I think it's great for the neighborhood, you know, that somebody like David and Michael come and put a stamp of approval on Midtown, you know, and bring an ABC restaurant that is available for everybody.
Right.
You know,
that's an amenity for the whole community.
That's for the whole community.
Yeah.
So it adds to the Matis of this world, to La Cabrera that just opened. You know, there are some great restaurants there. You know, there's Michelin star restaurants in the middle of Midtown.
Yeah. And what I also appreciate, I mean, this isn't a Midtown ad, but I'll add on to what you're saying. So I live in Brickell. I've been living in Brickell for almost 10 years now. I don't want to say this too loudly because I own apartments in Brickell, but if I did an office in Brickell, I don't know if I would live in Brickell. And I love Brickell because I walk to work, I walk to my client meetings, I walk to the gym, I walk to everything, right? But the traffic to get in and out of here, I fortunately don't leave too much unless it's for meetings and stuff, in off hours of the day. But if you have to come into or out of Brickell at 9 a.m. or 5, 6 p.m., es imposible.
Yeah.
Te morís. That's one. And then when I'm inviting people to Brickell, like come to Brickell, they have to eat the traffic, right? So if you're in Brickell and you live in Brickell and this is your world, I think it makes a lot of sense. But I wouldn't live here if it wasn't for that.
Pero es fantástico que digas eso, porque en Midtown está pasando lo mismo. Si tú ves en Midtown, hay muy pocos espacios de oficinas. Hay un edificio de buró, ¿no? Que donde nosotros queríamos conseguir una oficina para hacer el sales center de nuestro proyecto y está lleno. Y está lleno hace 3 años y no hay lugares para abrir. Por eso nosotros vamos a hacer 2 oficinas, espacios de oficinas pequeños.
Y tenés Gateway Wynwood en la 29, creo que
en la 29. Acaba de firmar sobre la 29 es el límite con Wynwood. Acaba de firmar Amazon un contrato de 50,000 square feet a una cuadra del proyecto.
Nosotros en Bercadia hicimos el préstamo de construcción para Wynwood Plaza, que son $200 millones, and Amazon is signing there, which is crazy.
Hicimos, cuando yo estaba en Related, dice Wynwood 29. So I'm very familiar with that whole neighborhood. You know, this is my 4th deal with Alex Badia. You know, I bought from them the SLS Brickell side. I brought from him the Midtown side, Standard, and now this one.
Wow.
So,
it's incredible.
Pero,
and the other thing that I was also wanting to mention on the Brickell stuff is when I look at Midtown, and I know you mentioned this, but I want to hone in on it because I think people don't appreciate it maybe as much as they should, is you are, when you say the hole in the donut, not only in Midtown, but you've got Design District to the north, you have Wynwood to like the west, you've got Edgewater, I guess, to the east, but you also have Mid Beach to the east. And if you think about Mid Beach, One Hotel, Soho Beach House, all that is right on the 195. And then you're still close to AAA Arena, Miami World Center, downtown in Brickell, which is just south. So I think as a location in Miami, you're so well located to go to anywhere you need to go.
Let me give you two.
This sounds like a Midtown advertisement.
No,
you get maybe some like sales commission.
No, but let me give you two things that support your theory, you know. for the first tower, we picked proper hotels.
Yeah.
And why did we pick proper hotels? Yeah. Because you take I-95, you go to the beach, and you're in Shelbourne by Proper. Proper has opened the Shelbourne. The Shelbourne.
They opened recently.
They just now, like a week ago.
Let's go.
Yeah.
I wanna go.
No, we were there. We were for the opening. The hotel is beautiful, you know, and the hotel is in what's called Billionaires Road. So it's next to Rosewood, that is selling at $5,000 a square foot. It's next to Bulgari. You know, it's next to the W. It's next to
the Shore Club.
The Shore Club, which is Auberge. You know, again. So what again, as a developer, and this is something that Jorge Perez always taught me,
which we'll get into.
We'll get into that. But you have to sell value.
Yeah.
What value are you giving to the buyers? You know? So my theory is, again, when you're comparing, because all the developers, we're, you know, competing for the same buyer.
Right.
So what do we give them that other people don't give them? So I give them 25% of my project is open space. Yeah. 2 parts. 1 part on Midtown Boulevard, 1 part on North Miami Avenue. 2 paseos with retail, cool retail that is still not in the design district. Hey, the Lululemons, the Narbonas, the All Saints, you know, cool brands, you know, that are appropriate for that market also in Midtown. Yeah. And that are really, I think, where, you know, people shop.
I mean, I have meetings with very wealthy developers and they're wearing Lululemon
and so we are giving you that. Then we are giving you a paddle club, you know. Then we are giving you a gym. We are bringing you all those restaurants, all those cafes. So you come down from your apartment and you have all this ecosystem that is public with a piece of grass to bring down your kids, where probably the owner of all the retail is going to be doing activations. Yeah. And those are the things I think people value. Yeah. You know?
And just to give people some perspective.
Plus the connection to the beach. So you have access to the beach. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And you are there. Yeah. Like in 5 minutes. So. Yeah. Again, I think it's a great opportunity for people to come in. Yeah. As I told you before, we are developing the project in 2 phases. So first we are developing the north phase that has 2 towers, 2 residential towers with its own parking garage, you know, approximately 600 cars, and a second phase on the south, again with 2 towers with another parking garage of 600 cars. As we are developing the first phase, on the south part of the lot, we are going to be opening a social club for Midtown. Cool. With 12 courts of paddle for the next 3 years.
I'm going to buy a unit in this building.
For the next 3 years.
I love paddle. I'm like very obsessed.
Yeah, for the next 3 years, you know, we are going to do a paddle club, you know, with a nice F&B outlet, maybe a Pura Vida. We don't know. We're talking with different, you know, guys. Yeah. You know, so it becomes like a social club for Midtown. Yeah. Because what happens in Miami, and what happens to you and what happens to me, what do you do on a Saturday, on a Sunday when you wake up and your friends are busy and you have nowhere to go? You know, you start putting the TV on and there's really nothing close by in this urban area. So the fact that we can build a club, a real social club for Midtown for the next 3 years while we build the project. And then the paddle clubs, the club itself is going to exist on top of the building. I think it's a home run.
I love that idea because just the idea that comes to mind is I was in Paris for the first time, you know, a few years ago, and they have El Jardín de Luxembourg, which is like, for example, you go there any time of the day, and there's people reading, no sé, yoga, and just a place to hang out. I'm in Brickell and like, you know, maybe I do a Brickell Key Walk. Yes. Maybe I go to Soho Beach House on a Saturday if I don't have plans, but there's no place to just walk, and that's just where I run into people 24/7.
And I think that's going to be, that's the, you know, cities need open space. And, you know, cities need small pocket parks again. And I think that open space, you know, it's going to be something that is so valuable in Miami. For sure. We're building buildings, but nobody is thinking of a space for people to get together.
Yeah. And just to give people some perspective, right? So it's a 5-acre site.
Yes.
You mentioned David Martin and Michael Simpkins bought that corner in the Northeast.
Yes.
So that corner is 1.6 acres.
Yes.
They bought it for $40 million.
Yes.
So it's $25 million an acre.
Yes.
You, Alex Padilla, you guys have 5 acres. So it's potentially a $125 million site. Give or take, right?
Yeah.
Give or take. But my point is, how much of what you're looking to do on all the 5 acres has already been determined, or is like, this is what we're thinking, but we're starting with this tower?
No. We have the whole master plan. Everything has been determined.
Wow.
You know, we have the paseos. You know, it's part of the conditions also that the city asked us to do. The city, when we started showing them the drawing, said, we want public space.
Yeah.
You know, the commissioner of that area also said, hey, we want public space because the people in Midtown, you know, have a lot of dogs. If you go to Midtown on a Saturday morning, you know, everybody's on their Lululemons going to exercise or to run somewhere. They want people to, all the sidewalks are full of people all the time. So we wanted to respond to that. And the fact that Midtown is at plus 14, you know, we're at plus 14 feet from the water.
Oh, you're saying the water?
So we never get flooded.
Yeah.
So that means that all our lobbies, all our restaurants are at the same level. As the sidewalk.
I don't know about that.
You know, which is something, for example, here in Brickell Avenue is 3 feet or 4 feet lower than South Miami Avenue. That's why we could, when we did all the buildings that you mentioned on South Miami Avenue, SLS, Brickell Heights, Millecento, stuff like that, all those lobbies being at ground floor creates a completely different vibe. Yeah. You don't have these 4 steps or 5 steps that you have here that kill retail.
Yeah.
They kill retail.
Yeah, because nobody goes up. Nobody goes up. Solo entra.
Nobody goes up.
Yeah. Second floor retail is tough.
But you're in leasing.
Yeah.
That's why the design district, obviously on top of the brands that Craig has brought, he has done a phenomenal
I'm not in leasing, but Craig Robbins, what he's done in design district is incredible.
No, phenomenal, you know. Yeah. But, you know, that's why they pay $500 a square foot.
Yeah. It's crazy.
In leases.
It's crazy. And trees. They added a lot of trees. People love it because you need the shade in Miami.
Of course, you need shade and you need trees that give shade. You need oaks. You need tapabuyas. You need the local trees that really are adapted to the weather of Miami. And we've done a great job with the guys from Natural Artificial, Andres Arcila, who's the landscape designer, because these 4 towers, you know, surround a space so that you get an idea, you know, we can fit, you know, in our open space, the Miami Dolphins Stadium.
Wow. That's crazy.
So the 4 towers are looking into the Miami
Dolphin Stadium size.
Yes.
That's big.
So all those trees, and the trees are all thought at different levels, and each level has a different color of flowers and a different color of leaves.
Got it.
So what we were thinking is when you have all the towers around, you know, and this is like a coliseum, you know, looking down, you're going to be from your apartment, you're going to be looking down at the parks, you're going to be looking down at the paddle club, you're going to be all the amenity levels of the 4 towers are on the same floor.
Very, very cool.
So we are designing all this, you know, as a big painting, basically, you know, with the landscape guys looking down and saying, hey, what do you see from the top of your...
You see everything. And 5 acres gives you like a blank canvas, like a lot to play with. It's not, cause I saw a lot of land. You know, we just put an acre, it's probably too soon to say, but we just put a site under contract for like $100 million, but it's like an acre. Yeah. And they're just going to build a tower, and it's going to be a phenomenal, successful tower with great views, but it doesn't have this, you know, master plan project. The value that you're adding that you speak to. This is just, you know, a
valuable thing is
really
open space.
It's really interesting. So, okay, you don't start with $2 billion projects.
No.
You know, you've worked your way over, you know, 3 or 4 years. You've worked your way over a lot of years to get to where you are today. So I kind of now want more background. Were you born in Miami or born in...
I was born in Argentina.
Eres argentino.
Soy argentino.
¿Te gusta Messi?
Me encanta Messi, you know.
La pulga.
Me encanta Messi, you know. And yes, I was born in Argentina. Estudié arquitectura en Argentina. Y después me fui con una beca, con un scholarship a Europa. Y estuve trabajando en Europa 4 o 5 meses. Tenía que volver a Argentina. My parents are both architects, you know, so they had an office of architecture. So,
Entonces, te graduaste de la universidad en Argentina. Entonces, tú estás en Argentina hasta los 20.
Siempre sí, hasta los 25 años.
¿Y a Europa dónde fuiste?
A Bélgica.
Okay, cool.
In Brussels. And then, these guys offered me a job they told me, hey, do you want to go to Dubai? And I'm like, okay, no problem, Dubai. Let's have an experience in Dubai.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we built an airport, in Dubai. I spent 10 years in the Middle East.
Did you
Dubai,
really?
Abu Dhabi, Cairo.
Wow. I hope you traveled a lot, because when you're there, you can go everywhere. Sri Lanka.
I traveled everywhere, At that age alone, I went to Israel, I went to Jordan, I went to Algeria, I went to Morocco, awesome. I went to Australia, we did a lot of trips to China back then to buy material for the projects in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So it was a great time.
So you were working when you were building this airport, right? So you're working for like a general contractor?
A general contractor.
Okay.
Yeah, got it. General contractor. So I was like
based out of Belgium or in Dubai? Sorry.
In Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, and in Cairo. We built hotels. So, so I started as an architect. Then I did contracting for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And then I always looked at the developers as the guys who were actually making the decisions,
and making the money sometimes.
Yeah, or losing it, but basically making the decision.
By the way, I always say developers might even be underpaid with the amount of risk that they take. I always say that I'm a broker because I don't take any risk. I close a deal and I make cash, and I make more than enough cash for my lifestyle.
100%.
I see that. I mean, these guys, you guys can make hundreds of millions of dollars, whatever it is, but the risk you take, I couldn't sleep at night.
Gigantic.
Yeah.
So I had done, I studied architecture. I come from a family of architects. Then I did 10 years working for a contractor. And I always wanted to come back and study in the US.
Okay. But by the time so when did you come to the US?
So I applied first to MIT when I was like 29. I got accepted at MIT.
You did.
And I was going to go to MIT to study. And then these guys in the Middle East told me, no, here's more money. Stay working with us, and I stayed until I was 33.
Wow. So you did not live in the US earlier than 33?
Yeah, I know. I didn't live.
Wow.
I started working with George when I was 35.
No way.
So, it's funny. I did,
this is Jorge Perez, by the way.
Jorge Perez. Yeah. I did another podcast and a guy was telling me, so how do you tell the young kids, how to get fast to the luxury car and to the jet? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What the hell are you guys talking about? People, the younger generation now, they all think that it's easier with crypto and, making money fast. I said I'm not a good example. And that's really not my objective in life at all, Yeah. And, but you're in real estate. Everybody, they tell me everybody goes to these events all dressed to the T's and stuff like that. I'm not.
People make fun of me. I don't wear a watch.
Yeah.
I've lived the same type of lifestyle I've lived since I was in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And right now, my career is getting me a lot of traction. It's like, dude, how do you do it? I'm like, I've been doing this for 10 years and I've been working my ass off.
Yeah.
80, 100-hour weeks for a decade. And now people are like, wow, how do you do so much? I'm like, there's no get rich quick scheme. At least I haven't figured it out.
No. And at the same time, I always tell everybody, hey, my humble suggestion, arrive first, leave last.
Easy.
And always have lists of the things that you have to do.
Make
sure that you have follow-ups and lists. This is an industry where follow-up is more important than anything else.
There's a statistic where it's like, 20% of the people actually reach out. But then out of that 20%, only like 5% of that 20% follow up. And then follow up once and follow up twice. It's like 1%. So basically, if you get 1,000 people, there's only 2 or 3 that'll actually follow up with you twice. And for me, to your example, that's my whole business.
I tell everybody, if you go to sleep and there is an email that you didn't answer, that you didn't answer, even if you don't have the answer, answer back saying, I got your email. I cannot get to it right now, but tomorrow by 11:30, you will have an answer. Okay. Yes, no, it costs this or it costs that. That's it.
You want to laugh? I have a team at Bercadia and the things I do with everyone. I'm like, guys, just reply confirming receipt. We'll get back to you tomorrow. Whatever it is. You don't have to wait for you to work and then just be responsive. And that's something that I actually talk about a lot because I've had here Isaac Toledano, Jay Masterman, all these guys. They are all ultra hyper responsive.
Of course.
But like 11 p.m., 7 a.m., 10. I'm with Isaac here. He'll take a call. Okay, 2 seconds. I'm with Omar. And I'm just like, así con todo.
It has to be like that, you know. The only thing you cannot waste is time. Yeah. You can waste money. You can make mistakes, you know, but time, you never recover time.
Yeah.
You want to recover money.
You want to laugh? I've heard that my whole life. There's another quote that I just heard recently by a guy named Naval Ravikant, which I like a lot. And he says, you know, money, you can spend it, but he also says time you could also waste. He's like, you know what you can't waste? What's becoming even more scarce than time? Attention. Because people right now, where their attention is in 50 million different things. You've got guys that want to be in crypto and in real estate and in apparel and in this, and your attention is really what's scarce. So what the guy says is like, you could have all the time in the world, but if you're not focusing on and you're not paying attention to what you should be paying attention to, se te desperdicia.
Claro.
You know, and I'm like, that is really interesting because now people can sit on the couch and una hora goes by and they're just looking at, you know, our videos on Instagram.
and so to go back to
your trajectory.
No, let me go back to Midtown Park for a second because it's all, you know, again, in real estate, in our careers, you know, it's all based on relationships. For example, you know, the fact that Proper is owned by Brad Corson and Brian DeLoe, you know, and Brad was the owner of Viceroy. So we did Viceroy here in Icon Brickell at the beginning. That's where the relationship developed with him and with Kelly Warsler, you know, his wife, who's a great designer. Yeah. And then, you know, I told him, hey, let's do this project together. You already have a hotel on the beach. So let's brand this residential tower. You know, I had seen what they did before in Austin, you know, actually came back from us Proper. There's a Proper hotel and condos in Austin.
Are most of their work hotels or condos?
They are a hotel company, but they also have Core, which is a developer, a real estate developer. They have, I think, 5,000 hotel rooms. Okay. You know, they have Proper and then they have other brands. But the funny thing is that, for example, in Austin, the Proper hotel and the condos sell for more than the Four Seasons, more than the Ritz-Carlton in Austin. So
more than the Four Seasons.
More than the Four Seasons. I didn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know? and I went.
I believe you because you're an honest guy.
I went to Austin this weekend. Yeah. You know, and you can check, you know, you say, Austin Proper condos for sale. You know, I think they have units now in $2,000 a square foot in the middle of Austin. Wow. You know?
Crazy.
So again, you know, there's and again, this happened because of a previous relationship that I had developed during the years at Related.
Right. Know? So let's go back to Related. Okay. Yeah. So you're 33 years old. Are you still single or you have married and kids at the time?
35 years old.
When you come to Miami? Or where did you land?
I went to 33, I started at MIT. I went to MIT. I went to MIT. I did a master's in real estate development 1 year. Okay. You know, which is part of the Sloan program.
Oh yeah, Sloan. And you were single when you just...
No, I had a girlfriend back then. That's another long story. Yeah. She's my wife now.
Okay. Then I do want to get into the story.
We were boyfriend and girlfriend. She's my wife. And
did you guys meet in the Middle East?
We met in Argentina and then she came to Egypt and then we broke up and then we met years later. You know, that's a long story. That's another podcast. Yeah. You know, but it's a very interesting story.
I love it.
That's also like another pillar, you know, arrive early, live late, you know, do a list and marry somebody that's going to be with you for the whole ride.
I love that.
You know, that's the biggest decision and the most important decision. That's the most important partner you're going to have in your life.
For everything.
You know, I think for me at least.
For everything.
That's how it works. You know? She also happens to be an architect. She also happens to have impeccable taste. So she's the biggest, she is my biggest critic and my biggest supporter. So, you know, that's great.
That's amazing. So you were at MIT for a year, you graduate, and then when you're graduating, just put me in your mind when you're graduating. You say, I've got all these opportunities. I know exactly where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do. Or you're like, well, what do I do now?
I graduated in November of 2001, after 9/11.
That sucks.
You know, my resume was 10 years of experience in the Middle East, you know, and I'm a guy from Argentina. So imagine the fruit salad.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to
Everything but American.
you know, it was incredible. So I had to start changing my story, my pitch. No, I was really based in Europe and I used to travel. I was like the head of the country. You know, I started like BSing, you know.
Me 10 years ago. Yeah.
You know, and during the last months at MIT, you have to write a thesis, and that thesis is a chance to meet, you know, all these high caliber developers. I met with George, I met with Steve Ross, I met with a lot of people. And, you know, and George says, but so you speak Spanish and you speak English and you did real estate and you're an architect. That's great. You know, come and work for us.
But how did you get introduced to George?
Just saying, hey, I'm studying at MIT and I have to do a thesis. Mm-hmm. My thesis, I got a bank, LaSalle Bank from Chicago, you know, to sponsor my thesis. Yeah. And it was 2001. It was the time that a lot of pension fund money was moving to Latin America. Okay. You know, to see if they could have, you know, opportunistic investments in all those countries. So they were, you know, so we did an analysis of pension fund investments in Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, and the correlation to the stock market in the U.S. Basically to say whether it makes sense.
Not correlated. Or,
whether if it made sense or not to take that risk. Mm-hmm. If the risk-adjusted returns of going to these emerging markets made sense. We knew the answer from day one.
Then you reached out to George.
And then I reached out to George just to ask him about his experience with Latin America and stuff like that.
And how did you even find out who he was? And
the website, 25 Google, years ago. You know.
Okay. Because at the time in 2001, Jorge Perez was like, you know, obviously he's a, you know, billionaire, everything, huge person now, but like in 2001, was he already like?
He was huge.
Okay.
He was number one back then.
Okay.
And again, that's another principle. Try to get a master's from a good school.
Yeah.
Those names, you know, MIT, Harvard, you know, Columbia, open a lot of doors. Yeah. You know, and it's like branding. Yeah. It's a little bit like branding. You know? Yeah. So if you say, hey, I'm studying at MIT. Yeah. Any developer will say, oh, what a pleasure. You know, let me learn something. Yeah. Also, you know,
out of your principles, that's the one that I least agree with. Cause I didn't get a master's and I'm just, the branding
you're a hustler, you know. Yeah. You're a hustler. In my particular case, remember, I came from Argentina, then I went to Europe, then I spent 10 years in the Middle East.
You needed a career pivot.
To pivot. 100%. And I said, hey, let me clean myself, go to a good university, and then I wanted always to come to the US, you know, to study.
Yeah, I do work. So you reach out to George. He says, sure. And then kind of what?
Sure.
What was he asked? Like, can I go meet you or can
I go meet you? And, you know, and we spoke about what I was doing. And then he says, when you finish writing the thesis that you're not going to use for anything, come and work for us.
Really?
You know?
And at the time, so you're 35, whatever, 36. He was how much older? Like, was he 50? Was he?
Yeah, probably 55.
Okay. So like 20 years older, more or less.
Years older. I think
you're like excited because he's Argentine, Cuban Argentine?
He was born in Argentina from Cuban parents, but lived until he was 18 in Colombia. Okay. So he's a great marketing guy. Yeah. You know, we take him to Argentina, we say he's from Argentina. Take him to Colombia, his accent changes, you know. So George is a fantastic promoter of Miami.
He's amazing.
Fantastic, you know, really teaches you how to think and how to talk, to be able to transmit your ideas, you know, and convince people because, you know, we always said the first thing that we need to do is sell people Miami, the future of Miami, you know, and they need to buy that idea before they send the wire. Because they're sending the wire from Colombia, from Argentina to an escrow account in Miami. Right. So you need to sell them Miami first. Yeah. You know?
So you started related after MIT? What was your role?
I started related as MIT. I started doing as an assistant project manager in Tamarack.
Okay. Just for everyone's edification here. Here is Carlos, who has traveled the world, has built an airport as an architect, was in Abu Dhabi, was in Dubai, goes to MIT for his master's, then reaches out to Jorge Perez and is starting as an assistant project manager in Tamarack, which you don't know where that is. And that's why I say Tamarack. Look at where it is. At 35, 36.
35, 36 with a wife that was pregnant of my first kid.
Okay.
So I needed a job.
I want to really emphasize that because all the people I talk to, I'm 31, but all the people I talk to are 23, 24, 25, trying to eat the world. They want to be you at 29. And I'm just like, I don't know how.
Hey, to be me, you have to be close to 60.
Yeah, exactly.
Experience,
it's crazy.
I think practice makes you good, so
yeah.
I've been lucky enough to have worked, not only with George, but with Matt Allen, Ben Gerber, Sonia Figueroa, Eric Ford, and
amazing.
Patrick
Eric
Campbell, These are all guys that are my friends.
Eric's great. Ben is great. Matt's great.
So, it's, that was a great school. Obviously, JP and Nikki, Nikki lives across the street from my house. So,
cool.
So everybody, that I had a chance to work with, has taught me something and
for
I'm
sure.
very grateful.
We'll go back to sort of your career trajectory, but I just want to pause because you had mentioned you were asked another question in another interview of like the cars and the watches and all that. And you know what I've realized? All the people that I interview, all the clients that I have that I work with, a lot of them like you, all of them, the money is a byproduct of what they already enjoy doing.
Of course.
But you take away the money, you take away the fame, and they still will wake up and do exactly what it is that they're doing every day.
Yeah, I have to tell you also, I am very happy as I am, and I'm really happy to do other things on top of real estate. I love to travel. I love to visit other places, I love to enjoy cities. That's why also I like, what we're doing. Because, you go to, you go to Madrid and you walk around Madrid and say, when we do the project in Midtown, maybe we can put this bougainvillea in this way or stuff like that, or look at that.
It opens your eyes.
So you learn from, I can never understand, and let's say, I respect them a lot, but what's the pleasure in being a dentist?
Yeah.
Always looking into people's mouth, and my dentist is a great guy.
Yeah. Well, they say a smile is the first thing everybody realizes about you.
Yeah. So thank you, dentist. Thank you.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we are very fortunate.
We're fortunate to do what we do.
Very fortunate, to do.
I posted about this today on my story as a quote by Sam Zell. When they say, everyone keeps asking me when I'm going to retire. And I always tell them, retire from what?
From what?
He's created a life for himself that he just enjoys.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, and I came from a family that also did real estate all the time. My father was an architect, but really was more into real estate than into design or architect or architecture. He really liked design. He really liked architecture, but he made money out of condos that he kept in buildings that he designed, rents, redeveloping things and buying and selling stuff. So I've seen it my whole life. And it's really, I enjoy it a lot.
Right. You get energy from the people. That's another thing. If you're doing what you like, you give energy to people. And then if you surround yourself with people like that, you're most days than not, it's not 100%, but most of the time you're energized to be doing what you're doing, working with the people.
I see my kids, I have 4 kids. 3 of them are already in University of Miami. They didn't want to leave Miami. I will have to force them to leave, because they really love
Are you telling them to leave? Or are you telling them?
No, I'm telling them to go and study somewhere else.
Yeah.
But they wanted to stay in UM. So the 3 of them are in UM.
Yeah, I met one of your kids in UM.
And they really enjoy, I think it's the same thing that I had with my parents, I really saw them having a very happy life.
Yeah.
And then I saw what they did. So for me, what they did was the happy life that they had was a consequence of what they did. So they did real estate.
Yeah.
And, each day that we jumped on a car to go somewhere, the trips on its own were very interesting because they were pointing out things.
This thing, the architect.
And the architect and stuff like that.
And then get your attention. Your attention's like, wow.
Yeah. So it's like going, with a tourist guide around town,
everywhere,
around the world.
Yeah.
So I try to pass that on my kids.
Yeah.
And I think that they absorb it.
Yeah.
And then they see you happy. And then they say, wow, this is a great part.
Going back to the energy, right?
Yeah.
So a comment that I was going to make, a quote that I read that it was like, you know, it really changed my perspective. I forgot who said it, but it basically said something like, you will do more for your kids by working a job and doing something that you love than you will by having a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of money so you can have whatever, a big house, a nice car, whatever, but you're miserable and you don't like what you do, estás aquí, right? That'll actually likely be a worse, you know, thing to extend to your family and your kids than doing something that you're passionate about and that you love. And to your point, I mean, you just nailed it. You grew up with your parents being like, look at this and look at that and over here and just
curiosity,
excited.
you know, being very curious. Yeah. And I think also the love for cities, you know, the love for art, the love for cinema, for good food independent of 3-star Michelin or a taco in a taco stand.
En Honduras, en Argentina, en Mexico.
So the love for the pleasure that simple things give you, you know, and teaching the kids that it's not about the jet or the car or the clothes.
Yeah.
It's about being able to enjoy those moments. Yeah. And that if you do them with real passion, you know, you're going to be successful in life. Whatever you do, you know, you really have to have passion.
The energy. Yeah. Because then you burn out. If you don't have the passion for it, you burn out.
And, you know, also you're going to have a tons of failures, a tons of no's. Remember, I went to do my grad studies at 35. Yeah. You know, and people at 35 are sometimes in a different world. You know, I started my career at 35.
Well, now I've met people that have made their riches through VC and tech and crypto, and they're actually 30 years old and they are buying $7 million homes. And I'm like, that's amazing for you. Like, that's not my story. Yeah. And I wasn't in Silicon Valley in 2012 like you were. I was in Miami and I'm doing the best with what I got here.
Yeah, but it's different path, different
for
things.
Everyone.
I am very happy with what
I could not be happier with where I am and what I have. So this is going to be the best tangent. Now let's go back to Tamarack.
Yeah. So I started as an assistant project manager. Yeah. And I remember the first day on my job, working for, the construction guy was an old guy from Related, you know, Harry Webstone, you know, and I told him, hey, so what do I do? He says, go and measure the length of all the sewer pipes that we installed and go and check this change order, you know, and see whether it's, you know, and I had come from MIT, you know, it's like, okay, no problem. I started. And
in Tamarack, you're not measuring in Midtown.
Up, 3-story, you know, walk-up apartments with, on-grade parking. But there, you know, I learned the important things, you know. I remember seeing George shouting and coming to visit the site on a Saturday and talking about the importance of landscape, you know?
Really?
Talking about the importance of the colors and making us repaint the whole buildings and hiring a specialist in coloring called Aida Fry, you know, that for ages, worked with us when we used to work with a great architect also from the Grove called Roger Fry.
I was going to say Roger Fry.
Roger Fry. So again, those are, you know, that goes back to 2003.
Wow. That was so 35, 2003. That's when you were in Tamarack. And then how did you, cause you spent how many years at Related Group?
20.
Wow. 2 decades.
Yeah.
So 35 to 55, pretty much.
Yeah.
Wow. And then so
then we start, you know, 2003, 2004. 2004, we demolished the Sheraton where Icon Brickell is. You know? And at that time, you know, I was working in a division with Roberto Rocha, who was the head of one of the head guys that worked with George, you know, and we were doing rentals mainly. But then suddenly 2004, 2005, the condo boom started. Yeah. You know, and we did at that point 500 Brickell, Boynton Beach. We did a project in Boynton Beach, the Marina Village in Boynton Beach. And then, you know, 2008 happened. So the crash of 2008 was again a great lesson. Yeah.
Can you give me any stories or that as specifically as it relates to Icon Brickell?
Gazillion. You know, I was part of those. I was part of the meetings with HSBC. Yeah. You know,
HSBC being the lender.
HSBC being the lender, $600 million loan. You know, and with all the participants that loan was syndicated to all these different groups. HSBC had sold parts of that loan to different, participants.
Yeah, they tranche it out.
They tranche it out, and the loan was in default. We had proposed a reorganization of the debt, extending the debt, because remember, 2008, the real problem was that the banks refused to be the lender of last recourse to all those buyers that had bought.
Yeah.
So that the world came to a stop, and the buyers were not closing because the banks were not lending.
Giving the money. Yeah. Like I have a deposit to buy $1 million condo. So I have 500,000, but I need another 500,000 from the bank, and the bank's saying, I'm not giving you the 500,000.
Yeah. It was a little bit different. They had 200,000 and they needed 800,000 to close.
Now everything's $1 million. It's terrible. It's terrible.
So it was a great lesson.
So true.
It was a great place, a great moment to be alive.
Yeah.
So we started having the meetings on a Friday, and we were at this long table in the Intercontinental that still is there in the boardroom. We had 300 participants.
Wow.
And the participants were, they were introducing themselves. We are the Union of Firefighters of Amsterdam. We bought $1 million tranche, We are the kindergarten group of Seoul, and that's a pension fund. We are a bank out of Korea and stuff like that. So we make them a whole presentation. We think this is going to take a little bit longer to close all these units. We need you to give X amount of lines to all these buyers.
How many units was it?
Más o menos. 1,800.
1,800 units.
3 towers.
So 600.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So, bottom story short, what happened, I cannot say it because there's a lot of confidentiality. But, at the end of the day, HSBC said, no, thank you very much. But no, we are taking over the loan. Yeah. And so we went there with 2 buckets. Yeah. I remember the scene, it was like one of the scenes of, Tom Wolfe, we came with 2 buckets, with the 1,800 keys, and we threw them on top of the table.
Really?
Yeah, it was like that. So this is the building.
Yeah.
These are all buyers that the only thing they need is your financing. Yeah. And they said, no.
That's crazy. And then, so that's 2008, because I
2008. So 2008, what happens is, obviously this is 2009, 2010. So then George decides, okay, there's no more condos. Yeah. Fire everybody. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm the only guy left. So
at least he liked you enough.
And, he tells me, you know what? From now on, you are the president of the condominium division.
That has nobody there.
That has no one there. And, and also we had at some point, because we saw the writing on the wall, 2007. So we started branching out. We started doing projects in Mexico, projects in Cartagena, projects in Brazil. We started looking outside.
In Argentina?
Yeah. Also, we tried several projects in Argentina. Yeah. And we get to Argentina. In Argentina, we went back again 2014 with Acri. Yeah. So basically the company had stopped. Yeah. The old partners that George had were gone. Yeah. And we had to start again. Yeah. So we started again, and I remember George's first thing is hey, go to Cartagena, and we had a site in Cartagena. We had with a partner in Cartagena, and sell the site. I need the money to take care of all the stuff that's going on here in Florida. Yeah.
Like I need liquidity.
So I go and sell the site. We had bought a school in Cartagena. Yeah. The George Washington School in Cartagena. We had to demolish that school, build them a new school outside. And then the partners at some point said, okay, we'll buy it from you. So I had to go there and close the deal with them. Wow. So, long story short, we stayed there. And at the same time, we were developing Icon Vallarta. Okay. In Vallarta. And we were selling.
Where's Vallarta? I don't even know where Vallarta is.
Puerto Vallarta is on the west coast of Mexico.
Okay. And at this stage, did Related Group, George Perez, did he have his multifamily division, his affordable division?
The affordable division was there. Multifamily was not there. At that point, actually, Jay was working at Related. And Jordan Paul.
Oh, yeah.
George created like a fund, a distress fund to try to buy assets, back then.
Yeah.
So again, George was very fast, at switching from reading the market and switching from one place to another.
How was it in 2005, 6, 7 as it relates to like excitement and activity and money making compared to 2021 that we just saw? Cause 2021, everybody was making money and things were going crazy.
No, I think also what happened is
I'm like, how was it? You were like, it was great.
No, it was great, but it was great. Remember, buildings were selling with only 20% deposits. Right. We were allowing buyers to flip the contracts, so it was a completely different game.
Yeah.
The loans were a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Then 0%
down.
2008 happened, 2010. 2008, 9, and 10, we were in this waiting game, doing deals overseas, having the distress funds, doing deals here in Florida. And then we start looking around, and then we start seeing the Melos. The Melos were the first guys that arrived here. And I don't know if you remember, they did a job. Carlos Melo did a job called Biscayne 27.
In Edgewater.
A little condo building.
Yeah. We did Blue 27.
Yes. And then I went to see him and we were talking. I said, I'm doing it like we used to do in Argentina, 80% deposit.
Yeah.
80%
You're like, what?
Yeah. In Argentina, people are in Argentina where there's no financing. You build condos. Basically, people want to take their savings that they have on the banks and put it in bricks.
Correct.
So they give you money.
You got the blue dollar and the black dollar. Yeah. That whole company.
So, and then we started with My Brickell and Apogee Beach.
Okay.
Those were the first two jobs.
Oh, Apogee Beach was...
Apogee Beach.
Yeah.
The Apogee Beach was the first job. I kept a unit there George had a unit, Matt Allen had a unit. It was our place to meet during the weekends and talk business also.
That's awesome.
So we did those buildings with 80% deposit.
Yeah.
10% reservation, 20% by contract, another, X amount when we got to the pool deck, X amount when we got to your floor, X amount at the top of, then another reinforcing payment. Mm-hmm. So the balance was 20%. And with that, we showed the banks that there were real serious buyers that want to put substantial amounts of cash.
They're 80% of prices.
So
there's no way you can't find that.
Like a little 20%. Bridge, it was just basically a bridge to continue funding the construction.
Yeah.
And then we turned to 50% deposits.
Yeah.
And then all of that continued more or less until 2018, when the first presidency of Trump was, and we had the first, shock of the tariffs. Mm-hmm. You remember?
Yeah.
Back then it was also a situation like that.
Mm-hmm.
So then, things slowed down 2018 mainly because of that, and also because the market had overheated and Nikki and Jean Paul were already there
George's
working.
George's
sons were already working there. So, it was just a problem of time, it's like, and then in one conversation with George said, I think you can do this on your own, Carlos, and if you want me to fund you and to help you, and stuff like that, I'm very happy to do so and stuff like that. So I said, okay, maybe it's a good time. I had, participations in a lot of deals with George. So
that were still
giving me money and stuff like that. And George, was really a mensch, and a really, really, a good guy.
Yeah.
And I said, it's time to try it on my own.
Yeah. So this was 2020? 2020?
Yeah, 2019.
Was it pre-COVID?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Like these conversations were happening before COVID.
Yeah, 2000. Yeah, I think 2000. Yeah,
19.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So then COVID happened.
That's okay. So now I want to get into this story. So now you're on your own.
So then I am my own. And then COVID happens.
Yeah.
And then, suddenly the market explodes.
So wait up. Sorry. You graduate from MIT right after 9/11. You're the president of the Condo board after 2008.
Yes.
And you go off on your own right before COVID. Just to give people context.
Sometimes you're in the right place at the right time. Sometimes you're in the right place at the wrong time. When 2008 and I was the only guy left, then it's like, hey, you are the guy now. And then I got to ride
the wave.
2010 to 2018. So again,
They say pressure can burst a pipe or make a diamond.
Yeah.
And they've made a diamond.
Yeah, made a diamond.
So COVID starts, you're on your own.
COVID starts, I'm on my own, and then I start getting calls from all the guys that worked with us as partners in Related. Hey, you left, you want to come and work for us, and I said, work again in another company after the 20 years with George, A, I doubt that there's someone as good as he.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And B, I really don't want to be in an office again, working for someone. So I decided to partner with people.
Yeah.
And started with the Standard.
I was going to say, what was your first partnership with Alex Padilla?
Alex Padilla. Then we did something with Jackie Sofer and Solomia for a couple of years, and then I continue doing things like that, partnering with people that have sites and want the expertise that I have.
Right.
And I try to help them develop all the sites, and the Standard is a great case, of a very, very, very good success, again, because we understood the particularities of that site and we were there at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause it was now 2021, something like that.
Yeah. So again, I think it's a marathon.
Yeah.
This is not,
you're still jogging.
This is a marathon. Life is a marathon. And I have 3 kids. They're all good runners.
How old are your kids?
22, 20, 18, and 16.
22, 20, 18, and 16. Okay. Yeah. There's like 3 boys, 1 girl. What is it?
3 boys, and the last one is a girl.
A girl?
So,
amazing.
And they love Miami, and we are so happy, we are so lucky to live in a beautiful city as this. So part of the impetus is to create an impact, and to create a legacy. I think, again, Midtown Park is going to be one of the most important mixed-use projects in the country.
Yeah.
When you look at the design and when you look at the scale of it, I think it's an appropriate response to a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And what's happening right now in Miami is that we are completing these neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. So Midtown was developed and there was this big hole in the middle of Midtown that interrupted the pedestrian walkway from the design district to Wynwood. Mm-hmm. When we complete these jobs, these are going to be, a complete city. Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing that we are seeing in front of our eyes. Yeah. It was like when we did these projects here in Brickell, I remember one day, walking with George, we had our office there in One Miami, and we were walking to see a site and stuff like that. And suddenly we see the woman with the stroller with the baby, the guy with his coat, on his shoulder, walking back to his apartment. And I look at George like, you see all the people we put in the brochure of 500 Brickell? Yeah, it's actually, they're all there on the streets now. Yeah. And that's what we need. We need more density. Yeah. People don't understand that you cannot, that if you look at Miami from the air, there's only a very small portion of areas that have been developed, but we need more density. We cannot go into the Everglades. We cannot go into the ocean. Yeah. And we're going to develop South Florida in a space of maybe 20 miles from the ocean to the Everglades, north and south. Yeah. And the only way to do that in a logical way, I think, is going up. Mm-hmm. We need more density. Yeah. We need more schools. Yeah. Schools are a big one. If in Miami we had 2 more Ransom schools, 2 more Gulliver schools, 2 more Riviera schools, name the school that you want at the level that you want. Yeah. They will all be filled up. Yeah. We would have 3 times the amount. Well, you want to laugh. I'm talking to a lot of either school operators or investors now because I saw a lot of land. It's hard to find the land to build the school. No. And then, for example, also I went to Austin, and when you see the impact that UT Austin has in the city of Austin, it's amazing. In front of proper hotels, Google has done an office building, 1 million square feet. Yeah. The average kid that comes out of UT Austin goes in to work for Google with a salary of $200,000 at 22 years old. Yeah. Well, now I've started to meet those people in Miami. They work at Citadel, they work at Thoma Bravo, and they're literally 22, 23 making $200-300 grand. And I'm like, what? We're also looking at developing Sunset Mall, redeveloping with Alex. Oh, yeah. As part of the whole idea is, hey, what do we do with UM?
Yeah.
We offer them a satellite office there for a company, so for startups.
Yeah.
Because that's what we need. Miami we need more education, more public space, more circulation. We need to activate our river walk and our
boardwalk,
bay walk.
Yeah, Baywalk.
It's unbelievable that we can still not cross under the bridge between between Edgewater and downtown.
Yeah, I know.
You go to Austin and the whole river is connected.
Yeah.
And when there is a building and
Chicago.
they cannot connect, they put 3 barges and they pass in front.
Yeah.
But the access to the water and the access to public spaces is very, very important.
Yeah. That's why I'm excited about that signature bridge. A lot of people hate on it online. But
it's going to open and it's going to connect.
And they're going to put a park under it that's going to connect the arts and entertainment district with the island.
Look, we did Icon Bay, then we did Paraísos, and all of them have that pocket of public space in front.
Yeah, Paraíso has that little curve.
Yeah, everything.
You would be astonished. Like, I'm not going to name them, but I've had 3 podcast guests that, are obviously very successful. They all live in the Paraíso projects, Paraíso, and they're, extremely well off. And they're just like, I love the views. I love the little walkability. I can drive to wherever I need to drive.
And then there's a misconception of public space. People think, public space in front of my condo makes my condo less desirable because it's not 100% private.
Yeah.
And I tell them always, it's exactly the opposite. Yeah. Go and talk to somebody that has a condo in front of Central Park, or Champs-Élysées. Everybody looks at that condo and says, I wish I could live there, and it activates. We are social creatures, We are social creatures. We are not gated creatures. You don't want to be in a cage.
This is why Miami is growing so much, right? Because Miami is sun, it's community, it's people running around. Costa Hasi, you're not, in the cold. I didn't learn that seasonal depression was a thing till I was in my 20s. I'm like, wait, there's actually something called seasonal depression? They're like, yeah, it just gets dark and cold for months in a lot of places around the world or in the Northeast. And I'm like, why would anybody live there? That's your life you're talking about.
I think those things could have a tremendous impact, I hope, and I don't know, hopefully he's listened to me, but Adam Newman build a school in El Portal.
Yeah.
Bring one of your schools from New York. I think he has a school chain in New York. Put something there, in the school that was going to happen also.
And the avenues.
Yeah. I hope somebody builds a school. That's what we need. Good schools.
Yeah.
Good schools.
That's the bottleneck right now for more people coming in.
Yeah. My wife was in New York last year and she was with my daughter and I think they were in South Schwartz on one of these places and they're talking between them and they're talking in Spanish. And then a woman comes and says, oh, you're from Miami? Yes. Oh, we live here in New York, but they're going to move my husband to Miami and it's contingent on her, and she shows her daughter getting into Gulliver.
No way.
And my wife says, so did she do the application? Yeah, she's number 535. Do you think she's going to get in? She's like, no, she's not going to get in.
I was with Craig Sadnicki yesterday and he was saying, he's like, I've got clients calling me, like, can you get my kid into Ransom or whatever? I was like, no, I can't do that. We need more schools.
Yeah. We need more schools. I just had a call from the guys from Riviera, to open more schools.
Yeah.
If we bring more schools, I think Miami's future is brilliant.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
You know what the reason why I've continued to stay so bullish on Miami, cause obviously any market goes like this. People get excited, it slows down, gets excited, it slows down. But the reason why I remain so bullish is because now I'm meeting people you've too, for the past 5 years, not only from New York and Boston and California, but also from France, from Turkey, from Canada, obviously from South America, from the Middle East, and you meet them and they're like, I love it here. This is the best place in the world. I've traveled the whole world and I found the best place in the world. And when I hear this, I used to think this because my frame of reference was San Pedro Sula, Honduras. I'm like, Miami's great, but when you hear this from around the world, you're like, you're in a special place.
I don't know, you know that Francis Suarez, the mayor of Miami.
He's going to be on the podcast.
Francis just went with Trump to the Middle East.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And Francis brought the Saudi Arabia Fund to open an office here in Miami.
Really?
Yeah. And I saw you yesterday in Fox News, and I think it's going to be our next ambassador in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
That position is open.
Francis.
When he finishes the great job he's doing as a mayor.
Yeah.
So again, money is flowing in. Where did Trump see the Qatari Boeing?
Yeah, business.
Here, in Fort Lauderdale. I saw it. I was going to the Bahamas and I saw that monster.
Right, yeah.
So what I want to tell you, independent of what you think politically but Miami has an amazing future if we can attract all these buyers and all this wealth from around the world. Yeah. It's a secure place. Yeah. It's a place where people are super friendly. Yeah. It's a mixed place. Yeah. Yeah. You buy a condo here in Miami, and you're not going to sell it to somebody from Miami. No. You will sell a Brazilian, a Colombian, a French guy, a Canadian, a Russian, a Turkish guy. The amount of Turkish guys that we have.
Turkey are buying so many condos right now.
And it's a very small city. It's 500,000 people, city of Miami.
Yeah.
Austin is 900,000.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
And I tell, the condos of Proper, and, we were with some brokers and doing some events. I said, the people that buy the condos here in Austin, the resales, who buys the resales? Somebody else from Austin. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, Austin,
it's in the
here we are attracting people want to come to Miami, and we've done, and George, I have to credit him, has been an incredible promoter. We did huge. We went to Turkey, to Argentina, to Brazil, and we promote Miami, and that's why Miami is what
has
Miami
the brand.
Is.
If you go anywhere in the world and you tell them you're from Miami, I love the reaction. Oh, Miami! I love Miami!
We were in Mykonos, last year with my kids and my wife, and we go to a little Greek restaurant on the other side of the island. We have to wait there for I don't know how many hours, dirt road, and we are sitting under this, again, Bougainvillea trellis, beautiful, looking at the Mediterranean, fantastic, everybody naked,
Yeah, it's Mykonos.
Fantastic Mykonos area, we're like with my wife, this is paradise, I hope that when we die, if we meet a bear, we are like this, and the owner of the restaurant comes and says, hey, from where are you guys? You're from where? From where are you? No, we are from Miami. Miami! Yeah. I want to be in Miami. Miami is paradise. And we're like, this is paradise. No, this is impossible. The government taxes you. Yeah. The unions, these guys that work in my restaurant, they sue me. It's like,
you're having pretty good.
Miami. So what I'm trying to tell you is a place like that is, you think fantastic.
Yeah.
People, Miami, we are in a great moment. Yeah. And we need to improve on our infrastructure, improve on the schools, improve on public spaces. Yeah. We have that beautiful park next to Pam where you cannot really sit. You need 3,000 more trees.
I know.
Let's do a campaign, and plant trees.
Yeah.
Shade, trees. Yeah. Again, the basic things that I learned that first visit from George in Tamarack.
It goes back to Tamarack.
And by the way, I read the other day a quote also from Warren Buffett. If you want to sell and make more money with your house, invest in landscape.
Really?
A guy like Warren Buffett.
Yeah. It is true. When you walk in, it just looks beautiful.
No, shade, man.
I'll tell you this. I was working on a project. I don't know how much I could say. It was basically David Martin, talking about Overtown. And he looks at me and he's like, Omar, I'm going to make sure Overtown has more fucking trees than Coconut Grove. And I'm like, nice.
The underline, which is not stupid at all, but how important are the things? Yeah, how important they are to create programs for the people that live in a city to do,
Yeah, it's crazy. So I could end the podcast here, but I have another question for you that might be a whole nother tangent, but I have the time if you.
Yeah.
What do you say to call it, not late 20, but early 30, mid 30-year-olds that are working at a shop, are in development, are making, let's say, $250,000 a year. They're with $250,000 a year in Miami. I mean, you could survive, but you can't have a family and kids and live in, Brickell or whatever it is. As it relates to, do I go off on my own? Do I try to do my own thing? Do I just keep putting my head down and try to work here? When people are trying to make those decisions. Cause, I'm 31. Fortunately, I'm very happy with where I'm at in life. But a lot of my 30-year-old, social circles, a lot of them are trying to figure out how do I take it to the next level?
I think you have to work harder, and you have to work Saturdays, and you have to drive around Sundays and look for sites.
Yeah.
And you have to work longer hours. Yeah. You're 28. Come on.
Yeah.
If somebody tells me that, I tell them, hey, at 35, I started working, counting linear feet of sewer pipe.
Yeah.
What do you think? You're entitled to what?
That's true.
Yeah. People, there is a misconception that you're entitled to a good life.
Yeah. You're not entitled to anything.
You're going to be the result of your effort. The result of your effort.
Yeah.
And this is a very competitive world.
And this is a very competitive market
world.
Too. Yeah. I always tell people, if you don't have what it takes to break into real estate, you're not going to have what it takes to be successful in real estate.
This is it's a marathon, and you need to be willing to put the time, the effort. My kids, when I was young, in one of those parent teachers meeting, one of the teachers said, we asked your son, what does your father do? Mm-hmm. And your son said, I don't know what he does. He shouts all the day at the phone.
I love it. You need to move here, you need to move there.
And you're late. How's it possible?
Poner todo el mundo en las pilas.
Yeah, that's it, And I tell them, hey, el que no llora no mama,
¿Verdad?
That's it.
Squeaky wheel gets the grease.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I love it.
Again,
work hard,
we are very, very fortunate. We have some great, guys. The development community in Miami is amazing. I think that most of us are together also we need to make our universities better. We need to allow them to grow.
Yeah.
Growth is good. It's painful.
Yeah.
It involves traffic.
Yeah.
It involves every one of us, cursing when we jump on US 1 at 5 o'clock in the
Unless you got a helicopter or a jet, you're in traffic.
But you know what? We live in a fantastic place, and we need to make it and continue making it better.
And I think wherever you are in life, you could always look at it and complain about, the traffic or the this or the that, wherever you are. Whether you're 20, 40, 55, 75, you could always be complaining, or you can be being like, I'm in a pretty good spot. I like where I'm at. I'm making forward progress and just being happy with
I'm a mixed-use developer.
Yeah.
I'm a mixed-use developer. Give me traffic.
Yeah.
Please. All day long. Traffic means tenants.
Yeah. People stopping.
Means buyers.
Yeah.
Means,
I love it.
It's good things. Of course, we have to improve. And of course, we need more public transportation.
Yeah.
And of course, being in Midtown, we are going to have a Brightline station on 29th, a Brightline station on 36th. So, those are great things.
I'll tell you this. So I have a listing right now. It's $115 million high rise in Dadeland called Motion at Dadeland. It's on a metro rail station.
Yeah.
I was leaving to go tour, one of the biggest owners of real estate, probably in the world, in the country. And, I go from Brickell to go to Dadeland. I look at my phone on Waze, 57 minutes, which is, Dadeland's right there. And I'm like, I look at the metro rail, said, 24 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I hadn't taken the metro rail in years.
Yeah.
I'm in Brickell. I walk 2 blocks. I get on the metro, air conditioned, full. I'm sending emails the whole way through. The building that we're selling is on the metro rail station. I get off, I do my tour, I go across the street, I ate, I came back, got
That's
the metro.
an old Arnold's building.
Arnold, 13th floor.
13th floor.
Exactly.
Motion.
They're all, Motion at Dadeland. 13th floor. And then they sold it to Pimco and Lerner. And Pimco and Lerner just hired me and my team to sell it again.
Again, great groups of
the
guys.
Public transportation is just huge.
What I'm saying is it's a big shout out to all those guys, and that, so there's the generation of the Alan Ojedas, the Jorge Perez, the Carlos de Fortuna.
So I sold Alan Ojeda's site 8 months ago. Me encanta Alan. I want to have Alan. I want to have Alan on the podcast, and he's like, what am I going to talk about? I'm like, Alan,
great.
No jodas, come on.
He's in the board of UM together with me on the real estate, and he's always, these are great guys to learn from.
Yeah.
And then you have all these other younger guys, the Inigo, the Arno, John Paul, Nicky,
David Martin.
He's So again, I think it's a very, very healthy development community, and it's a community that loves Miami, and that's going to do everything. We are all going to do everything we can to live our kids a better Miami, a more complete Miami.
Yeah. I love it. Let's wrap it there. Carlos.
Omar,
Un gustazo.